And there's the mute all button, which was missing because I didn't have my participants up last time. Now I know where it's at. Okay. So, welcome everyone to June's meeting. I'm happy that you're all here. And for those of you who don't know me, and I think everyone here does, I'm Dawn Kovalevsky, and I'm this year's president. So we have some announcements coming up. We've got outings. We have 2 outings coming up in the next few weeks. And so those will be announced by email tomorrow. And also they'll be on our website in the morning. But we will have Steve Long talk about the first, talk about the outing. St. Paul Rodeo outing is what we're going to be doing. So Steve, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's in St. Paul, which is about a 40-minute drive. It's a big rodeo every over July 4th weekend. And one of the members talked about it a couple years ago that in the morning you can go. During the actual rodeo, you can't bring in any long lenses. But in the morning they have something called slack, which is free. And they do team roping and steer wrestling and barrel racing, and I'm forgetting one other thing. So you can go in, there's not many people there, so that you can wander around, find good spots, take pictures, and just take lots of action photos or anything else you want to do about horses and cows and cowboys. And it's a lot of fun. So that was the plan, and we're going to go down on the 2nd of July, which is the Wednesday, and we'll meet there around 9 o'clock. And we can do some carpooling if anybody wants to talk about that.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I've been to one rodeo and it was like, wow, this is so cool. I mean, you're not in your element, right?
Yeah.
It's not normal to be around cowboys and all horses and things. And so, in fact, someone submitted some rodeo-like pictures during the slideshow for tonight. So I thought that was pretty fitting.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that would be a lot of fun. And so anyway, we'll have the details about that going out tomorrow. And then we have another outing. Mike Burgess is heading this one up. Mike, do you want to talk about the outing, please? Are you there? You're muted. Well, I see Paula Burgess's name.
I thought I cut it off. I'm not Paula. Yeah, I'm Mike. So on the 27th, which is a Friday morning early, there is a what's called breakfast on the bridges, and it's anybody that's commuting either by foot or by pedal. And there are 4 bridges that are involved, but I want to go to the Tillicum Bridge and meet at 7:30 under the sculpture of the red balloons at the west end of the bridge. And I've never attended to it. Actually, Mike Baines told me about it, but would like to go. So there'll be a lot of people milling around and traveling across the bridge. And apparently there's some kind of light breakfast that everybody can have. And so at 7:30 in the morning, I'd like to meet under the red balloons at the Tillicum Bridge on the west end, Friday the 27th, and take some pictures.
That's great. You know, I think that's really cool because people who like to get environmental portraits, it's a perfect opportunity to get those. And also, it's so early in the morning that you're going to get some great morning shots along the bridges as well. And then your motion pictures, all kinds of things. So it's a great opportunity. And, you know, you're connecting with your community too.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's really important. So thank you for arranging that. Mike. Okay, next up we have that Blue Sky exhibition coming up, and Walter Oliver is in charge of the Blue Sky Committee. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that for us?
Okay, speaking of environmental portraits, that's the theme for this year's exhibition at the library wall at Blue Sky. There's limited space on the wall, so we're gonna do a little jurying thing. And by July 1st, we'll have out a more detailed message with information about how to submit, what you can submit, and all of that. Key dates, July 1st, we'll send out that detailed email that I was just talking about and announce that we're open for submissions. August 1st at midnight will be the deadline for digital submissions. And during the week of August 2nd through 9th, the board will select submissions for the exhibition, and selected artists will be informed and additional details will be provided. That's what I've got for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Walter. I think that's really a super great idea. It gives everybody an opportunity to show at the Blue Sky Gallery for free. There's no charge for this either. So be thinking about your environmental portraits and go out there and take some or dig through your archives to submit. And I believe you're only submitting one, correct?
That's correct. One
Okay.
person.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for all your work that you've done on that. Okay, and then let's see. Last, we had that print share, and there was lots of people there, and so there's a whole lot of talk about how we can streamline that more. Because those of you here may know that at the end we were unable to do comments or questions to the artist. They showed their work and then they had to sit down because we ran out of time. So Mark, Doug, and Mike got together and they came up with a plan to shift things a little bit. So Mark, could you please talk about some of the ideas to streamline that?
Yeah, I can tell you about that. So we met the week after the print share and discussed it, just trying to come up with ways that people can show their work and we can get the most use out of that time. And the things that we recommended to the board are one, purchase a timer that everybody can see so that everybody, it's like at this last one, I was looking at a timer the whole time and no one went over 5 minutes, which is what our allotted time was, including questions, but everybody doesn't know that. So it'd be nice if everyone could see a timer just so we can keep track of ourselves. That timer will also be used during the intermission when we're viewing the next round. We're going to set it to 15 minutes with the expectation that everybody can, in 15 minutes, can file through and get a quick look at the photos before we all sit back down, because a lot of time gets used during that part that could be used for someone presenting their work. And it is easy to kind of get sidetracked and start chatting with people about the photos, and that's understandable, but we just want people to know how the time's doing. We also are wanting to, right now, every presenter gets 5 minutes. We're going to change that to 4 minutes. One of the things we talked about was less prints, but 5 seems to be a good number, which is what we're at. So we're going to keep it at 5 prints because sometimes you need that many to tell a story. Sometimes someone just brings 1 or 2. So that's going to stay the same, but the time will be cut to 4. So each person will get just a little bit more time, a little bit less time, and that includes comments by people in the audience. Another thing that we're trying to do is open the doors at 5:30, because right now our contract is with MAC is that we have to wait till 6 before someone unlocks that door, and we get them to do it a few minutes before, but it's a big hustle and pushing around. So we're going to try to start opening at 5:30, and then the meeting will start promptly at 6. The biggest change that we want to try is that in order to show your prints, you have to get there before 6 and get on a list. Because what happens is people are there, we start the meeting at 6 and we see like there's 15 people, and then 10 or 15 more people come in during the meeting, and suddenly everything gets speeded up. And this way, the people who get there and get on the list will be assured that they're going to get their time. If there's extra time, then people who got there late or people who weren't on to get on the list will be able to present, but not necessarily. And then, as the people who run these, Mike Osborne, Doug Rundle and myself run these meetings. We're just going to try to be careful about, moving things along, but being respectful of people's time, because someone should be able to have time to talk about their work and get some comments. I think that's it. So we presented that to the board, and I think the board is going for it. It's just contingent on if we can start getting in at 5:30. We have to change our contract.
Yes, and I'm expecting a call back from them, and we know that the room's available because it's empty when we show up early, right? So I think this shouldn't be too big of a problem. And so when that print share email goes out, you will know whether we are going to open the doors at 5:30 or 6.
And it's a matter of being a victim of our own success, because these meetings are great. It's inspiring to see so many different kinds of work and hear about why someone created that work. And we encourage everybody to keep coming. If necessary, we'll get a bigger room at some point and figure out how to make that work.
Yeah. So great. Thank you guys so much for your hard work on that, and coming up with ways to streamline this process so it's fair and easy and not frustrating. Okay, anybody have any questions about any of those announcements? Nope. Okay. Okay, next up is our member slideshow. As you know, is your favorite subject is what I had asked for. And in the beginning, only 70 people, or sorry, I only had 70 images, which is really short from what we did. So I extended the deadline and got a whole bunch more yesterday. So we have a really good slideshow for you coming up right now. I'll be sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, that was an awesome group set of images that you guys submitted this time. It was just such a pleasure, and there was a whole bunch of them too. Anyway, so next July's challenge is architecture and nature in harmony. So, you know, think flower growing out of concrete, that sort of thing. But you could do much, you know, obviously a bigger scale. So stop sharing. Okay. Now, I am pleased to introduce Jared Decker, who is a photographer and the owner of Photo to Canvas here in Portland. I have been to his shop and it's really impressive, and so is his work. It's hanging all around his shop. It's just beautiful. Jared is here to share information about the print process, different mediums, sheens, archival quality, and file prep, as well as his journey from a photographer to fine art printer. You will have an opportunity to ask your questions at the end of Jared's talk. And Jared has an awesome presence on Instagram, super energy, lots of great videos with lots of great information. So definitely follow him. So, Jared, I will have you take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello. Bear with me. I'm super nervous. I've never talked to a group about my work, photography, or my print work. I thought I would just kind of give a little history of my photography and kind of how I got where I am today. I started shooting photos like seriously. And by the way, thank you very much, Don, and everybody for having me. I started shooting like 2012, 2013, and worked in the film industry. So I will work crazy for a few months and then have several months off. So it was a great opportunity to try to travel around and explore the wonderful region that we live in, and just spend some time alone in the woods. So I started doing that, and I took a picture that I submitted to a giant blog called thisiscolossal.com, and it kind of changed everything for me. I submitted it and they posted it, and it like Outdoor Photography magazine reached out to me and they published it and published me in a couple other issues, and it just kind of exploded. And I've never done this on Zoom, so I'm going to try to oh geez.
At the bottom of your screen, it'll say share.
I hit share. I just want to share a photo instead of my entire screen.
Well, you have to share, in order to do that, though, you have to hit the share screen, and then, yeah.
Okay, so this is the photo that, gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, of Silver Falls. And obviously it looks like a serpent's eye. So it was like kind of a gag thing, like that it got all this attention. Also got me my first like major negative criticism in the online photo world, which was something that was very difficult for me to deal with. But when that happened, I started like Fine Art America. Like I put my photos there. I just wanted to like quickly get stuff online for sale. And then shortly thereafter saw that their quality was like most POD places, their quality was just garbage. So I tried like a smug mug site and used Bay Photo for printing. I got a Canon Pro 100. Everybody probably knows what one of those are. They're like the kind of bottom end of Canon's professional photo printing printers, and they were available really cheap. Canon was like giving them away with camera packages. So I got one of those. I started like experimenting with printing on my own, and I had this one kind of went next. Photo I took that got a bunch of attention really, really quickly. And just it kind of changed my idea of like, okay, maybe I can make some money at this, and I can go when I'm off work, I can go take pictures, and then I can sell them when I'm working again. And but I was really, really struggling throughout this time with figuring out, like, I knew nothing about papers, about printing processes, about really anything. And metal printing had just, like, the aluminum prints had just come out, and I started printing on those from like Costco, and I ended up signing a deal with a Beard's Frame Shop in the Northwest that they were using my photos to try to sell their metal prints. So that got me a lot of exposure too. Um, and I was really excited about metal because I had never really printed anything, and just the vibrancy and the clarity and just the detail was like mind blowing to me. And it was new, so it was something different. Um, so I just kind of was rolling down that road, getting really excited about photography, and then I had a baby, and it kind of screwed everything up. Because my ability to, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go off on these shoots and do my thing went away. Um, and it also did not meld with my work at all. The film industry and kids don't mix. My schedule was just awful, and I wasn't sleeping and all of that fun stuff. So I started taking pictures of my child, and I kind of shifted from landscape work to portrait work. And, I was taking like 400 pictures a day of her, and really started to enjoy shooting people and just seeing people's expressions and just perceiving them in different ways, especially a, you know, tiny child who I couldn't actually get inside her head. So it was really, really a wonderful experience for me. Um, and I kept doing that. And what next kind of, I just wanted to get back into landscape of some sort. And um, let me see what else is share. I really enjoyed the perspective from drones. I very much hate drones, but I have one and I loved using it to take photographs. But I, like many people, absolutely hate being anywhere near a drone when I'm not flying it. So I really struggled with ever using it, and it was hard. It was really stressful when I would get nervous, and photography is about calm for me. And like the first day I really took it out, I shot this, which I love this photo, but it the drone went behind camera or haystack rock, and the screen went black and completely freaked me out, and panic ensued. But anyways, at the same time, my brother got his pilot's license. So as much as I hate heights, I was like, okay, let's take this to another level. And he had a small plane, still has a small plane that you can take the doors off. And I was like, let's take the doors off and fly around and take some pictures. And it was absolutely amazing. It, like, the intensity of being in a tiny airplane with no door on, and having two cameras hanging around my neck. It's incredibly difficult to shoot from a plane. But I really, really found it to be just like a completely fresh start, for photography for me. And just in this area, this is one of my favorite photos I've ever taken. And this is just up Sophie's Island, but like the light was just right. And it's just a perspective that you can't get from the ground. The last time I flew with him was a really intense, crazy journey up into the Hood River Valley. And there were storms. It was absolutely petrifying, and it was a horrible, horrible experience. But the photos that I got were magnificent for me. I was just really, really happy with them. So I did that for a while. He kind of phased out from flying a ton, and I got divorced, and that flipped everything upside down again. And I guess I skipped a step. COVID hit, and COVID kind of put the film industry on pause, and it wasn't really working with my kid anyways. So I had used this company, this Portland company called Photo to Canvas before, um, to do a couple just paper prints I needed for some customers in town. I was selling some prints, not a ton, but enough to make some extra money. And I called him up to place an order, and he told me he was selling his business because COVID was kind of bringing everything down, and he'd just been doing it a long time and never really gotten anywhere. So I talked to my then wife and was just like, what do you think? And we went for it. I bought his business and started doing it out of my garage. And the I just kind of started to go stir crazy, but I was shocked at how, sorry, I'm just kind of rambling, but I was shocked at how much there was to this world of printing. And I had never been somebody that really spent much time looking at other people's photography. It was always just about something that I wanted to do for me. But suddenly I'm printing all these people's work, and it really started showing me, just exposing me to a lot of really, really cool stuff. And then like the technical side of it, I'm a computer geek. It was super fun, and it was super challenging. And I was just really surprised at how much there actually is to it, even though I had been experimenting at home with this Canon Pro 100 and kind of figured things out, but I had never been doing it all day. And yeah, I really started developing a strong passion for it, but I was going bananas doing it out of my house. So I moved up into St. John's, into the back of another shop that just gave me cheap rent, and it was just a way for me to get out of my place. And when I got divorced, I suddenly found myself needing to make money a lot faster. My ex-wife was the breadwinner, and I was the stay-at-home dad, part-time photo printer guy. So I went for it and rented a shop a few blocks from my house that had been vacant for a while, and just kind of dove in, and really it just absolutely changed my life. I started posting a lot to Instagram. I was doing my YouTube channel, and getting really good feedback from people. Instagram was quite a bit different back then. It wasn't as big a pain in the butt as it is now. But I really started to develop all these amazing connections with my customers. And I was printing for a lot of artists that would make comments about needing, their originals photographed to print. So I was like, hey, I'm a photographer. And so I dove into artwork reproduction. And that's the majority of the photography that I shoot now, is photographing people's paintings. But yeah, the rest just kind of, it's just grown and grown. It was growing really, really slowly for a long time, but I started to really look at what struggles I had when I wanted to start printing my work, and what my competitors in Portland were doing, and trying to come up with, I wanted to figure out how to set myself a part and do something different. And I remembered when I started using Bay Photo and saw that they had photo prints and fine art prints, I had no idea what the difference was. And I was just very confused. And I struggled with just trying to like learn it all from YouTube because I felt like every video was telling me different stuff. And, you know, just talking to different people, I was getting a lot of mixed opinions. So the way I am, I just like, okay, I'm just going to go through it all myself and, you know, test everything myself and figure out the best processes. And I want to share everything that I'm learning with all of my customers. So knowing how hard it was to start printing my work, I decided that I wanted to really focus my business on helping people that are overwhelmed by the process because there's so many different aspects of it. And I feel like people that want to start printing their work to show is just a very, very vulnerable experience. And I think a lot of people that see other people's work that aren't necessarily like traditional style artists don't really comprehend how hard it is for photographers and artists and anybody that's a creator, sculptors, whatever, to put their stuff out there. And I felt like my role was if somebody comes to me and they're putting themselves out there and trying to start selling it or just trying to show it for whatever reason they're doing it, I want them to be able to focus on that and not all the technical aspects of printing. So I kind of advertise that I want to hold everybody's hand and walk them through this complicated process, and people really like appreciated that. And I made one ad kind of on accident. I made a reel for Instagram talking about that. It's like, you know, I've been trying to figure out what I can do to set myself aside as a printmaker. And I noticed that every single ad for print shops that I saw on Instagram was just pictures of prints. And that was just really boring to me. And it's like, we all know what a picture of a print looks like. I don't need to see it coming out of a printer. Like, so I made this ad just kind of explaining my approach to helping people with their work. And that was like 7 or 8 months ago, and it's like doubled my business. It's like so many people just absolutely latched onto that, and feel like customer service is very much a lost art, and it's like the most important aspect of my business to me, and people appreciate that. But I think one of the things that makes me really good at my job is I just want to keep learning. So whether it's in a group like this, or whether I'm talking to a customer, or whether I post a YouTube video and somebody in their comments is like contradicting what I'm saying, then rather than write it off, like I don't know everything. So I'm gonna dig into that, and it forces me to learn more and more and more and just get better at my job and help people more. And it's just become almost more of a passion than my photography ever even was. I'm trying to get back into photography now, but it's really difficult being a small business owner and a father of a 7-year-old. So yeah, I'm trying to do what I can, but that's basically how I got where I'm at. And I think something that just really swirls my brain around is when looking back at my experience of the amount of effort and time that people spend capturing their photographs, whether it be getting up for sunrises, whether it be traveling and hiking, or buying the gear and learning how to shoot a photograph of a freaking owl that's so far away, that's flying across, like you put so much into it to share it on a phone screen. And that's absolutely bananas to me. Like I was part of a pretty big group of photographers when I was doing all the landscape stuff that none of them ever consider printing. It's all for like Instagram cred. It just, they don't get anything out of it. And for me, like a photo is nothing until you get to see it in front of you printed like big. It's like, and that's me. That's not, doesn't have to be everybody, but it's just become such an important part of my life. And it's such an honor to be able to see all these people's different photographs and to talk to them about their journeys and their struggles with the vulnerability and like the negative comments that people make, and you know, trying to tell people just to make their art for themselves and ignore all that stuff. So yeah, that's my story. That was a lot of rambling. But I want to kind of shift from there to talk about some things that are some of the like the most important things that I feel about printing, and how that stuff is changing. Primarily figuring out like at first that there's two major kinds of printing in like the commercial print world, with large format printing. There's aqueous pigment inkjet printers like the Canon large formats that I use, that are known for their, you know, it's the archival, it's the longevity of these prints. They'll last forever. They have a really wide color gamut, much wider than you can see on most computer screens. And then there's this world of solvent, UV, latex. There's all these other kinds of printing that are more like sign oriented. But all of the big online shops now are using these other these other kinds of printing. I've always been the kind of person that's like, I want to make the best thing that I can. So if with the equipment that I have. So I've always stuck to these Canon large format printers. I absolutely love them. They're bulletproof. They do fantastic fine art prints. I print a lot of canvases on them, of course, but they you have to varnish all the canvases. They're a lot of work. So I've been dabbling in some of the other kinds of printing too, which has kind of opened up this world of color gamut. Most serious photographers know that you edit in RAW. If you're working in Lightroom or whatever, you're editing in ProPhoto RGB. And people, well, Adobe RGB is kind of what I was always taught is like the best gamut to use because it's kind of standard with print shops. But what I found was that like 90% of all my customers, including professional photographers, were sending me everything in sRGB, which is what we see on the internet. It's a much smaller color space. So I really started trying to focus on, you know, explaining to people like, these are the things you want to do. You can make these simple changes that are really going to help your prints. So that's been a lot of what like my Instagram channel is about, is just education and trying to tell people like, no, do this, because there's no, I don't know, your camera manual doesn't say that. But at the same time, I'm starting to see that there's like a flip side to that. And one of my struggles with all the YouTube information is I have customers that come in that have been like, I've watched 300 YouTube videos and I have spent so much time editing in this certain way and only working with 16-bit TIFF files and ProPhoto RGB, and then I'll just do a super simple edit in sRGB and I like the print more. So it's just really complicated to figure out what is the best workflow for you and what is the best kind of printing for you, and whether or not we're wasting time focusing on some of these details. For some work, most people would never know the difference. Some of us do. It's just, I think a lot of people tend to stress themselves out about these minute details that I still take very seriously, and I'm happy to work with people on them, but sometimes I think it can be too much. So with color gamut, which is like one of the most, it was always taught to me as one of the most important things to factor in as a printer that so many people ignore. And now I don't necessarily think it's as important as many people think it is. A lot of what I've learned in this industry is based around that. I did a bunch of huge, really gorgeous prints for a pretty well-known photographer a couple months ago, and he brought me all his images in JPEG format, and I was shocked by it. And he was just like, man, I've always printed in JPEG. I'm totally happy with these. I don't need to deal with massive files. I don't need to do whatever. And she's like, okay, to each their own. This is art. We all got to do what we want. But it was interesting to see somebody like of that level that just wasn't focused on it. And the people he was selling his prints to, I don't think ever would have noticed a difference. I've also really started to learn how, well, I learned quite a while ago how much different papers really affect the way your work looks. And you know, I mentioned I didn't understand the difference between photo paper, fine art paper. Photo paper, I basically tell people it will last 15 or 20 years. It's disposable for me. It's very thin. It you know, the coatings on like the luster and gloss papers, those coatings, you know, they kill the lifespan of your paper. I have matte photo grade paper that is technically archival, but it's full of brighteners. And it just doesn't hold images the same. And when I started printing my own work on cotton rag fine art papers, it was like a game changer for me. And now I pretty much try not to print any of my own work on anything but cotton rag fine art papers. My preference is Moab Entrada 290. I've worked a lot with people that get very excited about Hahnemühle papers, and I think Hahnemühle papers are wonderful, but they're far too expensive. They're like double the price of all the Moab stuff I use. I'm a big fan of Red River papers as well. Not so much their fine art papers, but I love their photo grade papers for people that are on a budget, and just stuff that you know, they don't need it to last 100 years. So yeah, I'm a fine art cotton rag guy all the way. I love Baryta papers. I've recently started stocking Moab's Juniper Baryta at my shop. And people are getting very excited about that. I think that's kind of it with papers. I also obviously print to a lot of canvas. Canvas was something that as a photographer, I completely wrote off because I think me and so many other people are used to really garbage canvas prints that you see in like hotel rooms and banks and stuff. And I was just never impressed by it. And customer of mine ordered some canvases and I got them done right and was like, wow, those really can hold a lot of detail, and they're super lightweight. They're super cost effective. Framing is really, really expensive. I have several different grades. I do some on 100% recycled water bottles. I do OBA free archival canvases, varnished. I do polyester canvases. There's such a big variety of medias to choose from. Let's see, I have a little list. Rendering intent is another big thing that I try to teach most of my customers. So if anybody is confused with rendering intent, it's actually quite simple. There's generally 4 in our print software, but the 2 that we use all the time are perceptual and relative colorimetric. And for me, well, basically the difference is it's just how they treat colors that are out of gamut. So if you are printing in Adobe RGB in 1998 and you have a green that is out of gamut, if you print in relative colorimetric, it is going to just shift that green to be in gamut. It's not going to affect any of your other colors. It's going to shift that green to be the nearest green to it that's in gamut. Perceptual, on the other hand, scales everything. It brings it all down till all the colors are in gamut. And for me, that works very, very well with photography. Relative colorimetric, on the other hand, works very well with artwork because I have a lot of artists that might have a color in their painting that they are very, very particular about, and I don't want shifting one blue that's out of gamut to affect the rest of the colors in their painting. So my kind of standard rule of thumb is I use relative colorimetric when I'm printing art, and I use perceptual when I'm printing black and white. I also have had a lot of issues in the past with printing black and white images in relative colorimetric. For some reason, I've dug and dug and dug, and I've not figured out the reason why. And if anybody listening to this knows, please tell me. They come out like a sepia tone. I've had a lot of misprints because I've read so much stuff that says print relative colorimetric with black and white, and half the time I do, it has this like sepia to it or a greenish tint to it, and it's maddening. And if I stick with perceptual, they look great. They come out black and white. So that's basically it with rendering intent. Aspect ratios are another big thing that a lot of people really struggle with. And they're complicated because this wonderful industry has, all these sizes that are based on old film sizes. You have 4x6 and which is 2x3, 35 millimeter. But then 5x7s, 8x10 going to 4x5, 11x14, which is kind of its own thing. And now phones shoot in 3x4, and probably 50 or 60% of the images that come to me are shot on phones. So that's a whole nother, and the majority of those people coming to me aren't photographers, so they don't have as much of a history in understanding aspect ratios and the differences. It's just really complicated having so many different aspect ratios, and all the smaller main sizes are different aspect ratios. So I think that's something that's really important to learn. As is resolution. One of my kind of pet peeves is DPI has absolutely nothing to do with image resolution. It's PPI, pixels per inch. DPI is dots per inch on our printers. But it's pretty basic. I try to print everything at least 300. Printers can go higher. So if I have the pixels, I'll print at a higher resolution. But I actually ask all my clients not to upscale any images before they come to me if they're printing large, unless they're really, really particular about how they look upscaled. Mostly because Photoshop is pretty poor. Its interpolation is not great as far as maintaining detail when you enlarge. I use a variety of tools. Topaz Gigapixel is my main one, but I try to keep its settings very far to the bottom. It can make a mess out of stuff if you push it too hard, but it can do really incredible things if you're starting with a sharp image. So much of it is just starting with a sharp image, and if you have that, it's really able to manipulate it in amazing ways. But RIP softwares, my software isn't actual RIP, but RIP softwares do incredible jobs with interpolation as well, but it's kind of scary to rely on something that you're not going to see the results of until it comes out of the printer. Especially if you're dealing with expensive fine art paper on a large print. So Gigapixel allows you to really get it dialed in within the software before you send it to print. With image resolution and with file prep, again, it's something that I ask people not to do too much of. Get your colors right, and that's about all I want you to do. I can say that one of the most important tips I will ever tell anybody, and it's funny because I get really excited to share information like this on Instagram, and it goes nowhere and it gets 0 views. If you are a Lightroom user or any photo editing software, I imagine has a similar tool, there's a lot of talk about sharpening. And I am not a big fan of any sharpening, really. I use some, but the default setting in Lightroom when you import an image is, I think the sharpening is set at like 40, but more importantly, the masking is at 0. And years ago, I printed a 40 by 60 aluminum print for a customer, and I thought I had dialed it in Lightroom, but it was a very open blue sky, and the entire sky was covered in little sharpening peanuts everywhere, and it was awful. And I went back and I looked at the sharpening masking slider was off, and the sharpening masking slider, if you hold the option key on a Mac, I guess that would be control or something on a PC. Sorry, I'm not great with PCs. And you slide that slider, everything that is black is not sharpened and everything that is white is sharpened. So if you have a giant sky or just a big solid field or just anything that is just one large section of color or just open space, there's 0 reason to have any sharpening on that, right? What are you sharpening? So if you hold the option key and you slide that slider up until only the things that are details are white, it helps dramatically. And it gets rid of all this unnecessary noise from every other part of your image. And I don't know why Lightroom's default setting is to have it on 0, because I used Lightroom for like 10, 12 years before I even knew what that fader did, that slider did. So that is an important tip. File type, I'll always ask for TIFFs. I think 8-bit is just fine in most cases. 16, it's not going to hurt if you have like serious gradients in your sky or something like that, sure, leave it in 16. But it makes the files tremendously bigger and it just kind of slows everything down. And I don't feel that it's really necessary in most cases. Not all, but most. So preferably TIFF files. I told you that guy brings me JPEGs. I'm not gonna use JPEGs if I don't have to. It's no more work to use a TIFF file. So I would shoot for TIFFs. PNGs are better than JPEGs, but not as good as TIFFs. And I kind of skipped over on resolution. I wanted to kind of point out that when you're trying to figure out how big you can print, if you have an image that's 3,000 pixels tall and I'm printing at 300 PPI, that means you have 10 inches tall is your image at my print resolution. So a lot of people think that that means they can't print it bigger than 10 inches. That is not the case. And there isn't a line of where you have to stop printing size wise. Almost every day I will get an email that says, how big can I print this picture? That is not a question I can answer. If you want to print really large, you can send me an image and you can tell me your dream size and I'll tell you what it looks like if I enlarge it to that size. But something that people don't really seem to think about is viewing distance. So people come into my shop all the time and pick up a print and they put it like 6 inches from their face, like a 24 by 36 print. And that's how they judge the print quality. And it's like, if you're printing something that big, you're not going to be looking at it from 6 inches away. You're going to be looking at it from 6 feet away. So in a way, the resolution isn't even really going to change. You can look at something on your phone that's this big, that's super detailed, but you're going to bring your phone close to your face because you're looking at a small image, right? So if you're looking at a big image, you're going to be across the room. So don't judge it from a foot away. And you can get away with a lot more than people generally think you can. I mean, I've print iPhone pictures 10 foot wide. So never limit yourself. If you have an image you want to print large, come to a shop like mine and talk to me about it. Like, don't assume you can't print it that big. There's too many factors to base, on pixel dimensions, how big you can print something. And some people say, well, if I put it on canvas, it won't be as detailed, so I'll get away with more. And it's like that, it doesn't really work like that. It's just too hard a question to answer. So try not to limit yourself. Print as big as you want to, and you can definitely do things that are going to help the process. I have a customer contacted me yesterday that's an old friend that's a really popular sports photographer. He's in tons of magazines, and his personal stuff that he posts online is almost all shot on his phone because that's what's in his pocket all the time. And they're stunning images. And he's like, he rarely prints, but he's like, I have somebody that wants one of my iPhone pictures like 4 foot wide. So I'm really excited to see, like, this will be the first time I've dealt with somebody's iPhone picture that is like a very, very skilled photographer. And I've only ever seen his iPhone pictures on Instagram, so super, super tiny. So I'm really excited to see what I can do with it and what it's gonna look like when we enlarge it. I think the only other things I wanted to kind of say, and then I'll happily answer any questions that I can, were about trying to sell your photos. And I don't sell tons and tons and tons of prints, but I've learned a lot of things working with a lot of people who try to sell prints, and a lot who are successful and a lot who are not. As far as Instagram is not a portfolio site anymore. When for years, when I was first shooting, it was really easy to grow on Instagram, and it was all about just showing your images. But I don't think it did a lot for a lot of people. I don't think it led to much. For some that got really big, it did, I'm sure. But everything has changed. And if you are trying to sell your work, I strongly advise you on Instagram to not just use it as a portfolio site, and to try to be open and vulnerable and use it as a tool to develop personal relationships with people, because that's what people are looking for now. And I think people are a lot more likely to buy your work if they know something about you. And that's really difficult. Part of the reason I stopped like trying to sell photos, like really putting a lot of work into it, is I did like some markets, and I absolutely hated talking to people about my photos. Like when somebody would walk up and say, "Tell me about this picture," like I don't want to tell you about it. Like, how does it affect you? That's what I'm more curious about. Like, this was a moment I had at 4 o'clock in the morning on the side of a mountain. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I've always been very introverted with my artistic expression. So that was a real struggle on Instagram and YouTube for me, of like trying to show myself. And I don't talk about my photography, but I talk to the camera all the time. And, the approach I take now is to just kind of be a moron and be like super goofy and dance occasionally, and like try to do things that just make me take it less seriously, even though it's absolutely 100% what is making my business successful. And like, don't worry about follower numbers, worry about the actual connection that you're making with people. I had a guy come in a few months ago that has like 300,000 followers on Instagram, makes a living from it. And he wanted to start printing his photos. And it was a big thing. He invested a lot of time and a lot of money into launching this print site. And he has 300,000 followers, and he didn't sell one photo. And it was like crushing for him, because the photos that he were selling were what he's actually passionate about, not this like niche thing that he was doing that got him all this attention. But he didn't, the people that were following his page didn't have a connection with him as far as his own work. They were just kind of like, what is this weird thing that he's doing now? So yeah, just focus on creating for yourself and trying to be open and trying to get to know people on Instagram or whatever media you're using, whatever social media you're going for. Marketing is brutal. It's a ton of work. I spend almost as much time making Instagram videos as I do printing. It sucks. But it's really, really important. Like, I have so many customers that have started a website and been so excited to sell their prints. Well, all my friends and my family told me to start a website and put my prints out there, and they're really good, and I'll sell them. And nobody buys them because nobody goes to their website. It's like you have to get people there. And there's so many people, especially with phones now, there's so many people out there taking pictures. There's just so much to sift through that nobody's going to find you unless you put yourself in front of them. So it's a ton of work. And I also have a lot of customers that are very focused on, I just want to keep taking photos for me and just enjoy it. And if you can afford to do that, it's the right way to do it. Print them and sell them if you can, but like to really push yourself to try to like make it a career. I'm not trying to like discourage anybody. It's just you have to really be in for a lot of work. And personally, it took a lot away from my photos when I was trying to do that. I feel it just put too much pressure on making sure that I can't get the perfect sunrise or whatever. And it's just like I would go to the same spot a dozen times until the light was just right. And you know, if I want to do that for me, that's fine. But if I want to do that to either get a bunch of Instagram likes or whatever, it's just it doesn't really seem worth it. So this is interesting. I'm looking at like my bullet point list that I made for this, and it was like I was nowhere near it. And I have no idea what I've even been saying for the last 45 minutes. So I apologize for just kind of rambling and spitting out nonsense. I'm much better at answering questions if people have them. I could talk for days and days and days about what I do. If people come in and they'll ask me something about color space, and we'll like it's an hour and a half later, and I've got no work done, and we're just like it's one of the best parts about my job is just talking to passionate people about their art and the technical side, the non-technical side. It's just super fun. And if you haven't printed and you haven't like gotten a photo that you're really proud of and excited about and seen it on a wall from like 8 feet away, like 24 by 36, do it. Just like once, if that's whatever. Because it's bringing it into that physical form versus looking at it on a stupid phone screen is like
Mhm.
a whole different world. And it's for me, it's a photo isn't finished until it's printed, and it's like it's just so much more satisfying seeing it in print than it is seeing it on a backlit screen. Um, so yeah, but blah blah blah. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I
Thank
do.
you.
Yes,
Oh.
here I am.
Hi.
My name is Ross,
Hi,
and
Ross.
I print myself on an Epson P800. I'd like to get the 900, but I have the 800. And I'm always confused as the difference between semi-gloss, luster, and pearl papers.
All right. Well, I'm not really going to be able to answer that question very well. I have no experience with pearl papers. The I have a customer that has previously printed on a ton of pearl, and I was under the impression that pearl is from him is more in the metallic side. So it has this like pearlescent sheen to it in the whites. That, but for me, metallic paper is very image specific. And semi-gloss is going to be a higher gloss from what I know than a luster. Luster and satin are pretty much the same world, but a lot of it is going to depend on your paper. So fine art paper, gloss is like a luster. Like I have a Hahnemühle metallic gloss, and my Moab Baryta are both technically gloss papers, but they look nothing like a photo gloss. Like they're way more subtle. Like I can't stand photo gloss papers. It's just too reflective. That's why I don't like printing on metal anymore either. But yeah, that's about all I got is luster's, I think, lower than semi-gloss, and pearl I believe has that.
The other question I had is, do you use ICC profiles?
Absolutely. So I have the Epson 900. not a fan. I'm honestly not a fan of Epson printers, period. The prints look great, but it's very, very high maintenance. And I print from rolls. I have a lot of fall off. So I have piles and piles of really nice fine art paper that I cut down and I want to feed through that little Epson printer, and it hates it. It absolutely hates it. But anyways, yes, I use ICC profiles, and on the large format printers, you use AM1 files as well. So on Canons. So those are like the sister of the ICC profile that you load onto the actual printer. The Epson 900 does that too. I don't know about the 800. So you want to put the matching profile on your actual printer. But those printers or those profiles are made from base stock profiles. So like Red River will get a certain Canon profile and they'll modify it to work the best with their paper that they want you to use. ICC profiles are tricky if they're not provided. I have some canvases that are from, not as big a name companies that don't provide ICC profiles. And I've contacted them and they'll say, often they'll tell me the Canon version to use, what other places would base it off. Because basically, if you're going to make an ICC profile, you'll print it on a Canon machine. You'll print it on the Canon built-in profile. You'll print your test charts on that, right? And then you're going to have them scanned to create the ICC profile. So your luck is going to be pretty good if you don't want to mess with ICC profiles, if you just make sure you're using what the paper manufacturer will want you to, like what they would base their file on. So I actually have struggled with one of Red River's ICC profiles on my Epson 900, and I have better luck if I use the Epson, I believe it's just the Photo Luster built-in ICC profile. And it looks fine. Honestly, with a lot of these printers, you can even let your printer, like the newer printers, you can let the printer manage the colors, and sometimes it'll look better than the ICC profile, depending on who made the ICC profile. It's complicated, but if you're using a bigger name like Hahnemühle or Moab or one of those companies, then yeah, if you can get your hands on it, use the ICC profile. It's not going to hurt. Stuff like the rendering intent is going to make it have a bigger effect on it than the ICC profile.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I make my own prints, but I don't print that often. What's the best practice for having the machine powered on or powered off between sessions?
I don't ever turn mine off. It's weird because they're supposed to go to sleep. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they come into work and they're off. What's far more important than turning them off is making sure you print.
Yeah.
Because otherwise your heads will clog. So I actually, one thing I didn't mention in my topics is the software I use. On my Mac, I use QImage 1. They have a PC version that it's actually based on called QImage Ultimate. That is absolutely fantastic software if you print from Photoshop stop. But QImage has a built-in scheduler, and you can set up prints. So if you're not using a printer often, like once every 3 days or whatever you set it to, it'll automatically just run something through. That's one of the other big struggles with Epson printers these days, is if the heads clog like crazy if you don't print constantly. But as far as powering down, I don't think it matters. Just make sure you print at least once a week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I got a question for you, Jared.
Yeah.
Well, I first want to say I really enjoyed your ramble. A lot of good ideas. Thanks very much. That was great. But you didn't say anything about where you are or how we would get in touch with you. And
yeah.
Are you okay with us just showing up at your door, or do you prefer appointments, blah, blah, blah?
absolutely okay with whatever works. I'm in North Portland. That was in like supposed to be in like my first line. I'm between Kenton and St. John's. I'm right on Lombard. The most important thing though is make sure that I'm there. If you walk through my door, I'm connected to another print shop that are not my friends, and they like my customers, and they don't know what they're doing. I moved my shop into this place to work with them, and then didn't pan out. So they bought some of my equipment, and they're trying to do my thing. But so make sure you see me. I'm the only one that works there. I'm totally okay with people just popping in. You can make an appointment from my website. If you want to make sure that I have just kind of time set aside to like go over a lot of stuff with you, it's better to make an appointment. It can be a little bit challenging if I have two people in my shop and you come in and I'm also trying to print a bunch of other stuff. It can be a little bit hectic. But yes, and you can find me on Instagram at photo to canvas PDX, and that has all the links to everything and my address and all of that good stuff. Phototocanvas.com, photo-to-canvas.com is my website.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Jared, I have a question.
Mhm.
I have a question about printing black and white. I think you mentioned that you recommend the rendering setting of perceptual,
Correct.
definitely for black and white. So two questions. One is when you're using your printer, is it pulling from all the inks when you print black and white? And are there any special additional settings when you go from printing from color to black and white?
No. Well, it pulls from every color. I don't know why. When I first started struggling with that sepia tone, and I did a couple matte black and white fine art prints where there was a green hue to a lot of it. In my struggles to fix it, that's like the first thing I did on my Canon machines. You can go in and you can look the last print, and it'll tell you exactly how much of every ink that it used. And it uses every color. I don't understand why. I've read countless forums where people are just like, how do I turn the colors off? Like, how do I just blacks and grays? Like, just print from those. And I don't know why they don't let you do that. The Canons on a Mac have a button in the print driver that just says black and white print that you can click on. Do not click that on. My experience with that is it gets a color image and you just click it and it makes it black and white. Like it's just like a very simple, like I have a couple images that I've printed hundreds of times literally of my own that are black and white. And when I was testing, I turned that on and they looked absolutely bananas. Another thing to throw in there with black and white images, never, ever, ever print grayscale. Always convert to RGB. No CMYK, no grayscale. Grayscale sends, again, it like makes these crazy warm tones and these sepia tones, and it just looks really, really funky. So even if like I have people that shoot in monochrome and we have to convert it to RGB before they print. But otherwise, on my Canon machines, I can't speak for the large format Epsons, and Macs use the Mac OS print driver. PCs are a different world. I'm diving into that world because I just got a latex large format printer. And it has to be run on a PC, so I'm starting to experiment with that more. But the print drivers are quite a bit different from what I've seen on my PC than on a Mac. But with Canons and a Mac, no difference.
I'd like to come back to your location. can you put your actual website and so forth in the chat? That would just make it a lot easier to find.
Absolutely. I didn't even know how to do that. Here we go.
I'll do it for you if I can get it. Well, I don't know why I can't get into chat here. What's wrong?
Did that work?
I live between St. John's and Kenton, and I drive that stretch all the time. I've never noticed your shop, so I obviously I'm missing something.
Where do you live?
I live in St. John's.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm the shop that I'm not a fan of is Copy Pilot. You know where
Okay.
Copy Pilot is?
I've probably seen it, but it doesn't come to mind.
I'm in University Park, basically.
Okay.
Well, I discovered you by going to the Rivermark Credit Union.
Yeah,
You're pretty close to that.
yep. They're on the corner.
Excuse me, I have a comment about the black and white printing.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the PPFers use Epson printers. I don't know anything about Canons, but on the Epson printer, in the printer driver, you can choose black and white. It's printer determines color, something like that. I've printed literally thousands of black and white prints. It's brilliant. The printer determines the black and white. You can pick their sepia, their warm, their neutral, their cold, their cool, whatever, or you can create your own black. And the beautiful thing is, once you print like that, you can print 100 different prints using the same formula, the same created black, and it will always be identical. And I have 2 blacks that I use for all of my black and white printing. And it's amazing how many people don't know about this.
yeah, because I have 4 Epson printers and I've never seen
Just
that in my setup.
right in there, just it's right there, right in front of you.
So,
And you will not have any trouble.
but does that mean you're sending when you send the image to the driver, is it still in color?
I can do it either way.
Because
If
that
I-
would be my
if-
concern is I definitely like
No,
when I convert something to black and white, I edit it after it's been converted to black and white. So if sending something in color and not getting to have like complete control over the edits would be my
No,
only
well,
concern doing it that way.
okay, if you convert, like I use Adobe Camera Raw, if I convert to black and white, it remains a color file. But I
Right.
see the black and white, I edit it, I make the black and white image that I want, I send it to the printer, and I let Epson determine the black. Or I tell Epson what black I want it to do. Voila, done, end of
Yeah.
story. And it will be consistent, and it will be, a cool black, a warm black. I create my own blacks. You can go right on the color wheel and create your own black. So, but old images, let me go further. My old images scanned from film are grayscale images. They're not color, they're grayscale files. And I can print them the same way, and they will be identical in color to whatever I've sent digital. So it's just bum, 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 bum.
Right.
Yeah. So have a look at that.
Yeah, I will.
Just
I will.
look at printing black and white on an Epson. And I wouldn't be surprised if Canon doesn't have something like that because they're such good printers.
Yeah, on a Mac, I know they don't accept for that. I mean, there is the black and white button that I think just converts it to black, but it doesn't give me any control. And
Oh, okay.
when I've sent a previously made black and white image to it, it comes out looking like garbage.
Yeah, well, and I know in the olden days, I got my first Epson in 1999, the first, professional Epson. And
Mhm.
it was hard getting a handle on all of that. But
Yeah.
once I realized that there was this black and white, option, the black option, I've had literally for 20 years over 20 years, I haven't had the slightest problem.
Yeah,
Mainly
I'll
black
mess
and
with that
white.
on my Epson and test it out.
Yeah,
Can I jump in?
yeah.
I learned from Northern Light Images, Keith over in UK, that he talks about in black and white. If you convert to black and white, do everything you're adjusting to make it black and white that you want, black and white. You turn on the printer manages colors and click on the black and white. You don't get the bronzing. The last one I printed, I thought, I'm going to leave it where I managed to do everything. It had a little bronzing to it. Clicked on the other, which he says to do, and it came out just black and white, no color cast.
Yeah.
whatsoever. So North Light,
That's what I mean. I've had a couple reps tell me, and I've read some people saying online, like, if you're struggling to get your prints right, like the first thing that you should do is just let your printer manage the color and stop messing with ICC profiles and doing any of that. And you're likely to get very, very good results because those, I don't know, the technology in those printers these days is just, it's all very accurate.
I mean, I use ICC printer profiles all the time. I mean, if I'm printing, you do that color, and then I'll edit an ICC profile and check it, and then I'll cut it. I'll edit it for tones and everything, and then I'll convert it to black and white and use the color channels to adjust my black and white. But I thought it was really interesting the way he explained it. He has a whole video on it about black and white printing and whatnot, and it comes down to that for me it worked out really better than after spending not doing that way.
So you're saying not using the ICC profiles and just letting the printer manage the colors.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Printing black and white is harder than printing color.
Yeah. Because if you print and use your color and manage it with the printer, it has a little curve in there or something that,
yeah,
like I say, like you do, where you can get color casts on it and whatnot.
and I tend to with black and white, I soft proof a lot more than I do with color if I'm printing to matte fine art paper, just because it changes the way blacks look so much.
I'll end up hard proofing just to see what it is and make it.
And compensation, I always use black point compensation, unless somebody specifically tells me not to, but it helps a lot.
Another trick, if you don't have the option of printing black and white on your Canon, is, and this is what we did in the early days, is you convert, okay, you want to make a black and white file. You convert it to black and white, and then you convert it back to color. And then you adjust the color of the file to give you the black and white that you want. But you shouldn't have to do that these days. I mean, that was the olden days. You changed it to a black and white file to get rid of all the color data. Then you turned it back into a color file and adjusted the color of the black you wanted. But you're talking ancient times. I mean,
with my luck, as long as I leave everything set to perceptual, I have zero issues with black and white.
Okay.
But it took me a long time of like reading people say to get the most accurate black and white, you should use relative and then it'll be different. Even though I have a 4000 and a 6100, they're basically the same printer. They use the same ink sets, and I would get different results for each one. That's the only negative part about printing, is just like when you just get these weird little glitches in a print, and it can be just this bottomless pit of time to try to figure out what's causing it, and money when you're talking about fine art papers. It's, fine art paper is not cheap.
Jared, if I can jump in, I have an old Canon. It's a Pro 9000, I think Mark II or something like that, and I'm still using it. And I print a lot of black and white. But what I do, contrary to what you said, I turn it to grayscale. And I do it, but what I do is I process in Nick, I think it's called Silver Effects or something.
Mm-hmm.
and it does come out a little bit on the warm side, which I actually like. But when I don't do the grayscale, my pictures come out on the magenta side. So that's when I quit doing that, because the magenta drove me crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because it's an older Canon. You know, I keep saying I'm going to upgrade, but the damn thing just
It
keeps
could be,
working.
you know, the Pro 100 is how I became YouTube famous, because it double profiles. And I like figured out a workaround, and that video's had like 60,000 views or something on YouTube, because so many people have Pro 100s. Like that one Canon printer is an absolute nightmare. And I can do the exact same thing with every other printer I have. And then I run it through that one, and it's just whack.
Yeah.
It could be. I'm not sure. I don't check every profile necessarily of every file that comes to me. I had somebody like 6 months ago that I ran their prints, and he had shot them in monochrome on his camera. And so they were in grayscale, and they looked horrible. And I looked at my computer screen, and there was no warmth. They were just black and white, and there was no color hues at all. And we did like 20 prints to try to figure out what the cause was. And then I noticed, I was like, oh, wait, this is in grayscale. And I converted it to RGB. It didn't change anything about the appearance of the image, but it instantly fixed it. So now whenever I see a black and white image, I just make sure it's not grayscale. Part of this is just because the way, you know, I'm self-taught.
Yeah.
So I learn by talking to people like you guys and experimenting. And like, if I can do that trick with my Epson, sweet. Now, like, I can't explain why printing in grayscale on my Canons, and I doubt the people at Canon support could either, cause me the issues. But yeah, that's interesting to know that if you do that, and I assume a 9000 still has like photo black and matte black. It has both.
No, it doesn't have two blacks. It has one black.
Huh.
Only got 8 colors. And I keep saying I'm going to upgrade so I can get more blacks, but I just, I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that the 1100, the Canon Pro 1100 is a fantastic printer.
Yeah, I'll probably go down that road.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of like trying to sell my house and moving, so it's like,
Low on the list.
I'll probably sell the printer at that point because I won't want to move it.
Right. Yeah, you should see mine. They're ridiculous.
Jared, I'm not quite ready to leave the perceptual relative stuff.
Okay.
I was under the impression that as long as you don't have out of gamut colors, they don't make any difference. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
The only point of those is how they deal with out of gamut colors.
Okay. Is out of gamut and clipped highlights, what's the relationship between those two things?
None.
Okay.
No, if you want to check the gamut, that's when you should soft proof and load. It's tricky depending on the print shop you're using, or unless you're printing yourself, you go into Photoshop or Lightroom and load the profile for the paper that you're going to use. And in Photoshop, if you turn on soft proofing, you can turn on gamut warning, and everything will light up. And in Lightroom, it does the same thing. It'll change the colors of everything that is out of gamut. And some people then try to manipulate those colors to get them into gamut. I don't. That just is a never-ending battle for me. Yeah, like I will just stick to my rule that I said of photos are always perceptual, art's always relative. But if I have an issue, then I can experiment. And when you're doing soft proofing, changing the rendering intent is not very helpful. It's just that way you can get a decent idea, because if you're in Lightroom, you're editing in ProPhoto RGB. So like what's out of gamut in your photo is not going to be the same as if you're printing to a certain paper on a certain printer. You know, that's the gamut you need to be focusing on.
But for black and white, if it's not out of gamut, then it doesn't matter what.
That's what logic would say. That's why I didn't ever think it was a deal. But when I switched the switch, it fixed it.
Okay, well, I'll give it a whirl.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so much of printing is like you can go on YouTube and you can watch 300 videos where people are going to tell you different things. And I wish I knew enough about like the software side of a printer to understand what could possibly cause all of these issues. But I don't know if anybody does. I mean, all I can do is like test on my machine what works the best for me. So if you print yourself, give that a shot and see if it takes care of it.
Okay.
And again, these are all things that like if it doesn't, when this is over, always people can always send me emails, give me a call at my shop, come into my shop, talk to me. Like I really enjoy this kind of stuff. So like trying to help you figure out the how to fix the problem is
Jared,
to do.
Jared,
Yeah.
I recently replaced my Epson 7900 with a Canon 2600 back in January, and I'm still learning how to use it.
Mhm.
Do you come to people's houses and work with them? Or
I don't. I don't have the time in my schedule, unfortunately.
Okay.
But a 2600 is only very, very slightly different than my two machines. So if you came to my shop, I would be able to help you, or we could set up like a FaceTime or a Zoom call or something when it's just you and I.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Jared, I have a question about like how do you determine like the paper, the best paper for a particular image? And then kind of ancillary to that is like how do you test papers? Are you using like color swatches or do you test papers? What do you look for?
I don't really test papers because it's really complicated for me to expand beyond the papers that I stock. I basically feel like I have one of every basic thing that people need. So I don't test stuff unless somebody comes to me and says, I specifically want to use this paper. And will you order me a roll so we can run it through your machines and then I'll experiment with it a little bit. Remind me the first part of your question. I'm sorry.
Well, that was, you know, like what kind of qualities do you look for? Like if I come to you and I say, gosh, I've got this print and I want it to have this, I don't know, pick a like an old-fashioned romantic look to it.
Personally, I base everything on sheen. The first question I say is, do you want fine art or photo quality? And basically, if money isn't a thing, I will 100% of the time tell you to use fine art paper. So that's kind of the first thing. And then it's a lot of it is the particular image, but it's tough because when I'm basing something on my own personal views, I don't know if what my vision is not going to be the same as yours. So I just try to point out that on papers with a sheen, like a luster or a satin or gloss, you're going to have more vibrant colors. You're going to have much darker blacks, which is really important to a lot of people. Matte paper, which is my favorite, has a very soft look to it. The way I used to edit my photos when I printed to metal, kind of based on the like 10-year ago Instagram trend of like what people were doing, was very saturated, very detailed, very, very contrasty. So for that kind of stuff, I was really into lusters and now that's why I have the Baryta paper. But the softness of matte paper is something that I really, really appreciate now. And it almost has a dimensional look to it. One thing you have to be very careful with is, my printers don't have white. So if you're printing black and whites, or you're printing images that have a lot of highlights and really bright, colors in them, they're going to be affected by the natural tone of the paper. The whiter your paper generally means there's brighteners in it, so it's going to affect the longevity of it. And like Red River's fine art paper is like half the price of Moab's, but it's warmer. Their bright paper is warmer than Moab's natural. Like it's so warm that snow looks yellow to me in black and white images or even in color images, and I don't like it. So that would be another thing to factor in when you're choosing a paper is the brightness. Like I look at my Red River Polar Matte photo paper and it's like copy paper. It's like so stark white that that's like a turnoff for me. If your image doesn't have much white in it, you're not going to see that obviously, but so the warmth is a big thing. The texture, Hanemule texture is great, but is it worth double the cost of Moab? I don't think so.
Texture of the paper or
Yeah.
texture? Okay.
Texture of the paper. Like I sell cold press fine art paper, which is like looks like watercolor. It's very textured. And people often ask like, oh, what paper do you recommend for this image? I was thinking about trying your cold press, and it's like, no, I recommend that paper for printing reproductions of watercolors that were originally done on textured paper. Like I think textured, like really textured paper looks weird with photos. But that's just my choice and my personal view. And that's one of the fun things about art is, you can like whatever you want. So I hope that is helpful.
Thank you, Jared.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, I sent you an order last week or yesterday. Now I'm wondering if I should change my paper.
I'm very, very often, because of my Instagram videos, people will say they'll order one and just say in the little note section, please reach out if you don't think this is the best paper. And I often do. But again, it's like, it's easier if you're in my shop because I can show you the differences rather than try to describe them or show you a crappy picture on a website of what the texture looks like. What paper did you order?
It was luster, but it was the same paper in my mind that was hanging in your shop with the forest and the clouds.
Yep.
Hung on
That was luster. Yep.
Okay, because I just loved that. I thought it was just.
Yeah, I'm just kind of a paper snob, I guess, where like the thinness and for the price, Red River's Ultra Pro Satin is fantastic luster paper. And like it does hold contrast really, really well and detail really, really well. And it doesn't show a ton of reflections. Like that's my big issue with Sheens is reflections. And that giant piece is like a perfect example of it's hanging beneath all these really bright lights and there's no reflections on it. I love, it's kind of weird to say that I love the feel of fine art paper, but it's not like when you walk into a room and you see a photo on the wall, you walk up and rub it. It's like, so the feeling isn't really that important. It's what, if the luster looked great to you from, when you saw it hanging, I'm sure you'll be happy with it.
Okay. Well,
but when you come back in, look at the Baryta, which is the luster sheened fine art paper I have. That's a lot more expensive, and it's just kind of to each their own. It may you may think it's great. You may prefer the luster. The luster is very smooth. The Baryta has some texture to it, which some people don't like, but it's also just expensive. And I sell a ton of the luster. I sell a lot more of the luster than I do Baryta fine art paper because it's affordable and the images are beautiful. It's just not what I personally choose if, if I can afford the fine art paper, I prefer it.
Okay.
I have another comment. The purpose of the Baryta paper was to be able to make an ink print that looks and feels an awful lot like a gelatin silver print on
Yes.
fiber paper. And they do.
Yep.
M-
Yeah,
my-
they're fantastic. They're just expensive.
I really like the papers, but very early on, I had this idea. If I'm printing in the darkroom, gelatin silver, I'm printing one kind of media. If I'm going to be doing ink prints, I'm printing ink on paper. So
Yeah.
why not just go with ink on paper? And now I print everything ink on paper. I won't go into the darkroom again. I mean, unless someone gives me a fantastic order, like for $1 zillion.
Right.
I have no need to, but it translates very well. But that was the idea of the Baryta paper, only I decided not to use it. I'm just going to go with ink on paper because it's ink on paper.
And there's a lot of places now that are pushing Baryta matte, which I've never worked with.
Well, we didn't have that in the olden days.
Yeah. I didn't really understand what the point of it was, but I
mean,
just need to wait
You
and see it
wouldn't want to
first.
try to copy resin-coated paper. The resin-coated paper came in the matte and the luster and the pearl and the super gloss.
Right.
The fine, cotton gelatin silver paper just had that beautiful sheen to it. And
Yeah.
if you wanted high gloss, then you dried it in a special dryer.
Hmm.
I think it was called a Fairtype. And it was dried against a super slick metal plate. And then you got the high gloss. But if you just air dried it, they were all had just a beautiful sheen, and that was that.
Very cool. Unfortunately, I have zero experience with developing.
Yeah, it's a different world, but
Yeah, for sure.
I'm glad I did it for about 40 years.
Yeah, there's a community darkroom just opened up in St. John's a bit ago that I'd love to go in and mess with sometime. I experimented with film for a while and developing my own black and white film, just never had any prints done, or never tried printing it myself, but it's expensive and I miss focus all the time. And was like, yeah, I just didn't have the time or the money to really go down that road. I would love to eventually though.
Well, it would be something to do for the fun of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to experiment, but I personally don't feel it's necessary.
Right.
I mean, it's mainly in the eyeball.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I really hate to end the meeting, but we're past time now. But anyway, Jared, I want to thank you for sharing your journey and your knowledge. And I'm really excited to see printing work from you. And thank you for everything. You did
Yeah,
a
sorry
really
again
great
for the
job.
ramble. Thanks everybody for their patience and for having me. And I really enjoy this stuff. So if you ever just want to come into my shop and check out my massive printers or just talk about printing and look at different papers and stuff, please do.
Definitely do. It was okay, that's it for tonight. So the next print share is Monday, July 7th from 6 to 8, unless we change it to 5:30 as discussed earlier. Anyway, thanks everyone.
Yeah,
Have a good
thank
night.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.